Absolutely. Here's a sophisticated, engaging, and continuous story for your YouTube channel. She had never expected her Tuesday evening to turn into anything extraordinary. The diner was quiet, the hum of the neon sign outside the window casting a faint glow across the worn-out tables. Emma, juggling orders and trying to keep her tips decent, moved with practiced precision, her apron dusted with flour from the earlier rush. She prided herself on keeping a smile, even when life seemed determined to test her patience. That night, as she carried a tray of coffee cups to a corner booth, she noticed a man slumped against the table, his face pale and his breathing shallow. Instinct kicked him before hesitation could. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. He coughed, trying to wave her off, but the color had drained from his face entirely. Emma had taken a first aid course years ago. Barely remembered anything, but she knew enough to recognize the signs. Heart racing, she dialed emergency services, staying with him, holding his hand, whispering reassurances she hoped he could hear. Minutes felt like hours, and when the paramedics arrived, she followed them outside, shivering under the cold night sky, praying she had done enough. When the ambulance doors closed, she leaned against the brick wall of the diner, heart still hammering. Little did she know, the man she had saved wasn't just anyone who wandered into her life. He was Alexander Crane, the CEO of Crane Industries, a conglomerate worth billions, a man whose face was plastered across business magazines, whose decisions could shake markets worldwide. But in that moment, he was just a human being gasping for air, and she had been his lifeline. Alexander never forgot her courage. Weeks later, a black luxury car pulled up outside the diner, startling Emma as she wiped down the counter. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, his gaze locked on hers. "Emma?" he asked, voice calm yet commanding. She blinked, recognizing him immediately from a headline she always skimmed but never cared for. Yes, that's me," she stammered. "I owe you my life," he said simply, "and I intend to make sure you're rewarded, not just for saving me, but for the heart you show when no one else could help." The following days were surreal. Emma found herself whisked away into a world she had only glimpsed on television screens and magazine covers. Alexander didn't just see her as the waitress who saved him. He saw her strength, her intelligence, her unwavering kindness. He invited her to events, introduced her to influential people, and even offered her a position in a philanthropic foundation he had created. The opportunities were staggering, yet Emma felt a strange tension. She had stepped into a realm so far removed from her own life that she wondered if she would ever fit in, or if the world she knew was already gone forever. But Alexander had his own plans. Beneath the billionaire's calm exterior was a man haunted by betrayals and losses, someone who had mastered the art of control but had forgotten what it meant to trust. And Emma's presence was both a reminder of his vulnerability and a challenge he hadn't expected. Slowly, their connection deepened, shifting between gratitude, curiosity, and something far more dangerous, desire. Yet both of them knew that the higher the stakes, the more fragile trust became. One evening, as Emma sat in his towering penthouse watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, she realized that saving a life had not only changed his world, it had irrevocably altered hers. She had stepped into a story that no diner apron could prepare her for, and Alexander, once untouchable, now depended on her in ways he never thought possible. But the city below held secrets, rivals, and enemies who were already plotting, unaware that the smallest act of kindness had set a chain of events in motion that neither of them could predict. If you want, I can continue directly from here and escalate the tension with secrets, danger, and romance, keeping it cinematic and binge-worthy for viewers. Absolutely. Let's continue the story seamlessly. The days that followed were a whirlwind for Emma. One moment she was unpacking gifts Alexander's assistant insisted she take, delicate designer boxes filled with clothes she had never dared to imagine wearing. The next, she was sitting across from him in his office, poring over documents that seemed to dictate the movements of entire industries. She had never felt so small, so aware of her ordinary life colliding with something vast. Yet at the same time, she felt a thrill she couldn't deny. Alexander watched her carefully, noting every hesitation, every question she asked. There was a natural intelligence in her that didn't require the formal education of boardrooms or the polished language of corporate meetings. She had street smarts, a courage forged from struggles most of his world had never known, and it fascinated him. He found himself lingering near her, offering explanations he didn't need to, waiting to see if she would challenge him, tease him, or simply listen. And she did all those things, often without realizing the effect she had on him. One evening, Emma accompanied Alexander to a charity gala. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and the subtle hum of wealth and influence, a world that seemed more fantasy than reality. She clung to the edge of his arm, heart pounding, as cameras flashed and reporters whispered. People who had been immortalized in headlines and power circles now greeted her with polite curiosity, some smiling in recognition of the waitress who had saved Alexander Crane. She felt exposed, almost like a character misplaced in a story she didn't belong to. But Alexander, sensing her discomfort, leaned down and whispered, "You don't belong anywhere but here with me tonight." His words were soft, but they carried the weight of command, and she felt an unfamiliar warmth flood through her. After the gala, he drove her back to the penthouse in silence. The city stretched beneath them like a sea of glittering lights, each one reflecting a life that could be hers if she dared to reach. But Emma wasn't sure she wanted all of that. The glitz, the pressure, the expectations. She was scared to lose herself in a world that demanded perfection and polished smiles. "Emma," Alexander said suddenly, breaking the silence. She looked at him, noticing for the first time the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. "Do you know why I survived so many challenges?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, curious and cautious. "Because people like you exist. People who don't see me as a billionaire or a symbol of power. You see me as human, vulnerable, and you act without hesitation. That is rare." His gaze lingered on hers, intense and almost painfully intimate. She felt her pulse quicken, the city lights outside the car blending into a blur of color and desire. Emma had saved his life, yes, but now she realized he'd begun to save hers in ways she didn't fully understand yet. Over the next weeks, the boundaries between their worlds blurred. Emma learned to navigate Alexander's realm, discovering hidden corridors of his empire, philanthropic endeavors that sought to change lives, and shadowed corners where deals and betrayals were whispered in hushed tones. Yet, every moment in this glittering universe reminded her of the diner she had left behind, of her small apartment and the late-night shifts that had shaped her resilience. She clung to the memory, grounding herself in who she was, even as she was pulled deeper into his world. Alexander, for his part, found himself increasingly drawn to her simplicity, her laughter, the way she questioned things others accepted without thought. He had lived a life of calculated strategies, of controlling outcomes and minimizing risk, but Emma disrupted all of that. She made him feel unpredictably alive. One night, while they reviewed a new initiative for a humanitarian project in the mountains, she laughed at a suggestion he made, so candidly, so without hesitation, that he realized he hadn't felt that kind of joy in years. It was reckless, intoxicating, and utterly irresistible. But the higher Emma climbed into Alexander's life, the more dangerous it became. She began noticing subtle tensions, whispers of resentment from employees, hints of corporate espionage. There were people who did not want her there, who saw her as an interloper, a potential liability. Alexander's enemies, both in business and in personal vendettas, were not idle. They studied her movements, calculated her weaknesses, and underestimated her resilience, just as they had underestimated her the night she saved his life. One evening, Alexander insisted she stay home while he attended a late-night board meeting, but she felt an unease she couldn't ignore. Something in the air, in the carefully curated calm of his penthouse, told her danger was closer than they realized. Ignoring Alexander's protests, she dressed and left to check on him, tracing the faint clues she had learned to follow: security cameras, access logs, whispers from trusted aides. By the time she arrived at the corporate tower, she had pieced together a threat that could have crippled his empire. Sliding past security with practiced stealth she never knew she had, Emma entered the boardroom just as a group of masked intruders attempted to seize confidential files. Heart racing, She improvised, using her knowledge of the building's layout and her quick thinking to delay them, buying crucial minutes. By the time Alexander arrived with security reinforcements, the intruders had fled, and Emma stood, breathless but triumphant. Alexander's relief was palpable, his eyes locking on hers with a mixture of awe and something far deeper. "You've done it again," he said, voice low and intense. "You saved me and so much more. Emma, do you understand what you mean to me?" Emma's chest tightened. She had known their connection was growing, had felt the unspoken attraction simmering beneath polite conversation and shared strategy, but hearing it voiced so directly left her both exhilarated and terrified. I just do what I can," she murmured, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just like that night." "That night," Alexander whispered, stepping closer, "was the beginning of everything, and it's only the start. You awakened something in me I thought was long dead. Hope, trust, and love. But it's not just emotions. With you, I see clarity. You keep me grounded, Emma. Even when the world is spinning out of control, you're the one constant I can rely on." For a moment, the chaos of their lives, the corporate battles, the hidden threats, the pressures of unimaginable wealth disappeared. All that remained was a charged silence between them, a promise unspoken yet undeniable. Emma realized that her ordinary life, her struggles, her choices had led her to this moment. She had saved a man's life without knowing his identity, and now he was saving hers in ways she had never imagined. But as the adrenaline faded, Emma sensed that this was only the beginning. There were challenges ahead, not just from outside forces but from within. Insecurities, societal expectations, and a delicate dance of trust and power that accompanied their worlds colliding. Alexander, for all his charm and brilliance, had secrets yet unrevealed, vulnerabilities he rarely showed. And Emma, brave as she was, had her own fears, her own doubts about stepping fully into a life so far removed from everything she had known. They stood together in the boardroom, the city lights reflecting off the glass walls, each silently acknowledging the uncharted journey ahead. Danger, temptation, ambition, and passion were all intertwined now, and the choices they made in the coming days would shape not just their lives, but the empire and legacies entwined with it. Emma understood that life had thrust her into a story far grander than any she could have imagined, but the real test was whether she could navigate it without losing herself, and whether Alexander could open his heart fully enough to trust someone with his world and his vulnerabilities completely. Even as they leaned into each other, feeling the pull of connection stronger than either had anticipated, a shadow moved unseen across the city, a force that had been watching their every step, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And the world they were stepping into, luxury, power, danger, and desire, was far more treacherous than either of them could yet comprehend. If you want, I can continue seamlessly from here for another intense 1,000+ words, escalating the tension with intrigue, betrayal, and a cinematic cliffhanger for your YouTube audience. Absolutely. Here's a compelling, cinematic, and captivating conclusion for your story. Emma stood at the edge of the penthouse balcony, the city sprawling beneath her like a tapestry of lights and possibilities. The wind tugged gently at her hair, carrying with it the scent of rain and distant streets she had once walked in plain anonymity. In that moment, she felt the weight of every choice she had ever made, the long shifts at the diner, the sacrifices, the quiet moments of courage that had brought her here. Every act of kindness, every instinct to help someone in need, had led to this improbable, extraordinary life. Alexander emerged from behind her, his presence commanding yet tender. He didn't speak immediately. Instead, he wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close as though he could shield her from the world's chaos. She leaned into him, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her own, a pulse that reminded her he was more than a figure in a magazine, more than a billionaire with untouchable power. He was human, and she had glimpsed every hidden corner of that humanity, and he in turn had come to know her strength and resilience. "You changed my life," Alexander whispered, his voice a mixture of reverence and longing. "Not just that night, but every day since. You taught me what it means to trust, to feel, to live." His eyes searched hers, and Emma realized that in them she saw the reflection of her own journey. Fear transformed into courage, uncertainty into clarity, ordinary into extraordinary. Emma smiled, a slow, genuine smile that carried both triumph and relief. "I didn't know what I was doing at first," she admitted softly. "I was just trying to help, but I didn't realize it would change both our lives forever." He laughed, low and rich, and it wasn't the laughter of a man who had it all. It was the laughter of someone reborn, someone who had discovered meaning beyond power and wealth. "You've changed more than me, Emma. You've changed this world I live in. And now we create it together." In the weeks that followed, their lives became a symphony of contrasts. Intense corporate battles tempered by quiet moments of laughter and tenderness, high-stakes decisions balanced by acts of generosity and compassion, and the ever-present thrill of love that neither had expected, but both had embraced fully. Alexander's empire expanded, not through ruthless calculation alone, but through the values Emma had reminded him mattered: integrity, empathy, and the courage to act for the greater good. And Emma, once a waitress navigating a small, predictable life, blossomed into a confident woman who knew her worth, who could walk beside a titan of industry without losing herself, without surrendering the strength that had defined her. Yet it wasn't just the world outside their penthouse that had shifted. It was the world within them. Alexander had let down walls he had built over decades, revealing vulnerability, tenderness, and a capacity for trust he thought had long vanished. Emma had embraced not only his world, but the depth of his humanity. Seeing the man beneath the public persona, the battles he had fought silently, and the scars that no boardroom could erase. One night, after a gala celebrating a major humanitarian victory, they returned to the penthouse, exhausted but elated. Alexander took her hand and led her to the balcony, the city below twinkling like a constellation they could now touch. "Look at all of this," he said softly, gesturing to the sprawling skyline. "We built more than businesses and legacies. We built a life that matters. Together." Emma leaned into him, feeling the certainty of their bond, the unspoken promise that no matter what storms came, they would face them side by side. "I never imagined this," she murmured. "I never imagined this kind of life." Alexander smiled, lifting her chin with a gentle touch. "And I never imagined finding someone who could see me so clearly, who could challenge me, love me, and inspire me all at once. You are the extraordinary in my ordinary world, Emma. And now, the story we write together will be legendary." In that moment, the past, the struggles, the fears, the quiet nights at the diner seemed distant yet vital, the foundation upon which everything extraordinary had been built. They had crossed worlds, faced danger and deception, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more alive than either could have imagined. And as the night deepened, the city's pulse echoing around them, Emma realized that life's most magnificent moments often arrive unexpectedly, disguised as chance, courage, and kindness. Alexander leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead, a promise of devotion and shared destiny. Emma closed her eyes, allowing herself to absorb the enormity of the journey. From saving a life to transforming worlds, from ordinary to unforgettable, from uncertainty to unstoppable. Their story, she understood, wasn't just about wealth or power. It was about heart, resilience, love, and the profound ripple of a single courageous act. And as the stars shimmered above the skyline, both of them knew the truth. They had not only found each other, they had found a purpose far greater than themselves. A life full of passion, adventure, and triumph awaited, a life where love and courage could conquer fear, where kindness could change the course of fate, and where two souls, once strangers, now intertwined, would face every challenge together, unstoppable and unbreakable. The city below pulsed with life, unaware of the quiet revolution taking place in that penthouse. Two hearts aligned, two destinies fused, a story of courage, compassion, and love that would echo far beyond the glass walls and glittering skyline. Emma's ordinary life had transformed into something extraordinary, a testament to the power of chance encounters, human connection, and the bravery to act when it mattered most.